Hi, I'm Rebecca. I stared at the ruins of what should have been my baby's nursery, paint splattered across walls, furniture broken, and my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. My mother-in-law stood in the doorway, chin raised defiantly. "This room isn't fit for my grandchild," she declared coldly. I called my husband James, the newly appointed Surgeon General, sobbing as I explained what his mother had done. He promised to come home immediately. What happened next changed everything about our family dynamic forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started with such promise. The spring sunlight streamed through the windows of our Georgetown townhouse, warming the hardwood floors and casting a golden glow across the nursery walls. I'd spent weeks painting with woodland creatures. At 7 months pregnant, my back ached constantly, but the discomfort faded whenever I stood in this room, imagining our daughter sleeping peacefully in the crib James and I had assembled together. I ran my fingers over the hand-stitched quilt my grandmother had made, admiring the delicate pattern of stars and moons against the soft cream fabric. Everything was perfect. The changing table stocked with organic cotton diapers, the bookshelf filled with classics I couldn't wait to read aloud, the rocking chair positioned perfectly by the window where I'd feed our daughter while watching the seasons change in our little garden below. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, texting that she was 5 minutes away. I groaned involuntarily. This wasn't a planned visit, but that was typical of Eleanor. She operated on her own schedule, her own rules, and expected everyone else to accommodate her. James kept telling me she meant well, that her occasional coldness toward me was just her way of processing that her only son had married someone so different from the society women she'd always envisioned for him. I smoothed my hair and practiced the warm smile I always forced when Eleanor was around. 7 years of marriage to James, and I still felt like I was auditioning for the role of worthy daughter-in-law. The doorbell rang sharply, twice in quick succession. Eleanor's signature. I took a deep breath, one hand resting protectively over my swollen belly, and headed downstairs. "Rebecca?" Eleanor said as I opened the door, her voice crisp as her pressed linen blouse. No hug, just a quick air kiss near my cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume and judgment. "You look tired. Is James working you too hard with all these White House functions?" I stepped back to let her in, swallowing the retort that bubbled up. "It's good to see you, Eleanor. James is at the hospital today. Emergency surgery. Would you like some tea?" She breezed past me, her designer handbag swinging from her wrist. "No time for tea. I've brought something for the baby's room. Where is it?" I hesitated, a strange flutter of unease spreading across my chest. Eleanor had made her feelings about the nursery clear the last time she visited. "Too bohemian," she'd said with a tight smile. "A child needs structure, not whimsy." But she was James's mother, and this was her first grandchild. I needed to try harder. "Upstairs, first door on the right. I'll get us some water at least." "No need to trouble yourself in your condition," she interrupted, already climbing the stairs. "I'll just be a moment." I watched her disappear up the staircase, her posture perfect as always. The unease intensified, but I brushed it aside. Eleanor was difficult, but she wouldn't do anything to upset a pregnant woman, would she? The sound of the front door opening again startled me. Cassandra, my best friend and neighbor, poked her head in, her curly hair wild as always. "Hey, Prego! I brought you those ginger cookies you've been craving." She stopped, noting my expression. "What's wrong? You look like you're about to throw up, and not in the normal pregnant lady way." "Eleanor's here," I whispered, glancing up the stairs. "Unannounced. She's in the nursery." Cassandra grimaced. She'd witnessed enough of my mother-in-law's thinly veiled criticisms to understand my anxiety. "Want me to stay? I can play buffer." I nodded gratefully. "Please." She brought something for the nursery, but a crash from upstairs cut me off. Then another. The unmistakable sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. "What the hell?" Cassandra muttered, already moving toward the stairs. My heart pounding, I followed as quickly as my pregnant body would allow. When we reached the nursery doorway, I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. The beautiful sage green walls were now streaked with white paint, Eleanor standing in the center of the room with a roller in her hand. The crib was disassembled, the pieces stacked haphazardly in a corner. The rocking chair was gone completely. Two men in workmen's clothes were removing the custom shelving James's father had built before he passed away. "Eleanor, what are you doing?" My voice came out as a strangled whisper. She turned, looking almost surprised to see me, as if she'd forgotten whose house she was in. "Rebecca, good. I was just about to call you up. The nursery needed a complete overhaul before the baby arrives. These men are from the design firm I used for our Hampton house. They'll have it fixed in no time." Fixed? As if my carefully planned nursery had been broken. You're painting over my mural?" I said, still struggling to comprehend what was happening. "Those animals took me weeks." Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "Childish scribbles. A proper nursery should be sophisticated. White walls, crystal chandelier, silk curtains. Don't worry, I've ordered everything. It will be delivered tomorrow." Cassandra stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "You can't just come into someone's home and destroy their property. Are you insane?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "This is family business. You can see yourself out." "I'm staying right here," Cassandra shot back, placing a protective arm around my shoulders. The room spun slightly, and I gripped the doorframe for support. My grandmother's quilt lay crumpled in a corner, splattered with paint. The mobile James had brought back from his medical mission in Japan was nowhere to be seen. "Stop," I said, my voice stronger now, fueled by a surge of maternal rage. "Stop this right now. Get these men out of my house." Eleanor set down the paint roller, her expression hardening. "Rebecca, you're being emotional. Pregnancy hormones, I understand. But this room isn't fit for my grandchild. James would agree with me. James knew exactly what this nursery looked like. He helped me design it." I countered, tears threatening to spill over. "You had no right to do this." "I have every right," Eleanor snapped, her polished facade cracking. "This is my son's child, my bloodline. You think you can just waltz into our family with your public school education and bohemian ideas. James may be blinded by whatever it is he sees in you, but I won't let you ruin my grandchild with your lack of breeding." The words hit like physical blows. 7 years of snide comments and backhanded compliments had been building to this moment of brutal honesty. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called James. It went to voicemail. He was likely in surgery. I texted him instead. "Emergency at home. Your mother destroyed the nursery. Need you." "Get out," I told Eleanor, tears flowing freely now. "Get out of my house right now." She looked almost amused. "This isn't your house, dear. It's James's family property. If anyone will be leaving, it won't be me." The workmen looked uncomfortable, clearly realizing they'd been dragged into a family dispute. One of them quietly set down his tools. "Ma'am," he said to Eleanor, "we can come back another time when—" "You'll finish what I'm paying you to do," she interrupted sharply. "The room needs to be cleared completely. Nothing from before stays." My phone rang suddenly. James returning my call. I answered immediately, walking into the hallway for privacy. "James," I sobbed, unable to keep my composure. "Your mother broke into the nursery and she's destroying everything. Everything we built. She brought workers and they're taking apart the crib and painting over the mural, and she ruined Grandma's quilt and—" "Slow down, Becca." His voice was calm but concerned. "What do you mean she's destroying the nursery?" I tried to explain coherently through my tears, each word making the reality more painful. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. "James?" I whispered, suddenly afraid. What if he sided with his mother? What if he thought I was overreacting? "I'm coming home," he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Don't let her do anything else. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Relief washed over me. "Hurry," was all I could manage before hanging up. When I returned to the nursery doorway, Cassandra was physically blocking the workmen from removing the changing table, while Eleanor stood with her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. "James is on his way home," I announced, drawing strength from the knowledge. "Everything stops until he gets here." Eleanor smiled coldly. "Perfect. He'll explain to you why this needed to be done." The next 20 minutes were excruciating. I refused to leave the doorway, afraid that if I turned my back, more damage would be done. Eleanor sat primly on the window seat, the only piece of furniture still intact, tapping away on her phone as if she hadn't just demolished my dreams for our daughter's first room. The workmen stood awkwardly in the corner, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. When the front door finally opened and James's footsteps pounded up the stairs, I nearly collapsed with relief. He appeared in the hallway, still in his hospital scrubs, face flushed from rushing home. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, taking in the scene with widening eyes. Eleanor stood immediately, her expression softening into the doting mother she always became in his presence. "James, darling, I was just giving the nursery a much-needed update. A surprise for you and Rebecca." James stared at the paint-splattered walls, the dismantled furniture, the ruined quilt, his jaw tightened visibly. "Mom," he said quietly, dangerously, "did Rebecca ask you to do this?" Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "She wouldn't know what's best. This is your child, James, my grandchild. We need to ensure the proper environment from day one." James turned to the workmen. "Please leave my house immediately." They didn't need to be told twice, gathering their tools and hurrying past us with mumbled apologies. Once they were gone, James faced his mother fully. "What you've done is unforgivable." Eleanor's confident smile faltered. "James, you're not thinking clearly. You know your wife's taste is questionable at best. I was only—" "Stop." He cut her off, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You destroyed something Rebecca and I created together for our child. You came into our home without permission and deliberately damaged our property." "It's family property," Eleanor countered weakly, echoing what she'd told me earlier. "Yes, it is," James agreed. "My family, Rebecca and our daughter. That's my family now, Mom." I'd never seen Eleanor speechless before. She opened and closed her mouth, her perfectly manicured hand clutching at her necklace. "You don't mean that," she finally managed. "I'm your mother. I raised you alone after your father died. Everything you are is because of me." James's expression softened slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. "I love you, Mom, but what you did today crossed every boundary. You disrespected my wife, you disrespected our home, and you disrespected my role as a husband and father." "I was trying to help," Eleanor insisted, tears gathering in her eyes, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in years. "No," James said firmly. "You were trying to control, as you always do, and I've let you get away with it for too long." He took a deep breath. "I want you to leave now. We'll talk when I'm less angry, but right now, you need to go." Eleanor stared at her son in disbelief, then at me with naked hatred. "This is your doing," she hissed. "You've turned him against me." "Mom!" James's voice rose sharply. "Enough. This was your doing, no one else's. Now please, leave before you make this worse." Eleanor gathered her purse with trembling hands, her perfect composure crumbling. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "Both of you." After she left, James and I stood in silence, surveying the wreckage of our daughter's room. Paint dripped slowly down the walls, covering the little fox I'd spent 3 days perfecting. The broken pieces of the crib lay scattered like kindling. "I'm so sorry," James whispered, pulling me into his arms. "I had no idea she would go this far." I leaned into him, exhausted. "What are we going to do? The baby will be here in less than 2 months." He kissed the top of my head, his hand resting protectively over my belly. "We'll rebuild it, better than before." "Your mom said this is just the beginning," I murmured against his chest. "She's not going to let this go." James pulled back slightly to look me in the eyes. "Listen to me, Rebecca. From this moment on, things will be different. I've let my mother interfere for too long. because I felt guilty about being all she had left. But she crossed a line today that can't be uncrossed. I wanted to believe him, but fear still coiled in my stomach. Eleanor Harrington was not a woman who accepted defeat gracefully, and she had connections everywhere, including at the hospital where James worked, and in the political circles he now moved in as Surgeon General. What if she tries to hurt your career? I asked quietly. You know she could. James's expression hardened. Let her try. Some things are more important than career advancement. You and our daughter are at the top of that list. As we stood there among the ruins of our nursery, I felt something shift between us, a new strength in our partnership, a clear line drawn in the sand. For 7 years, Eleanor had been the shadow third person in our marriage. Now finally, James had chosen decisively. What we didn't know then was that Eleanor had already set her next plan in motion, one that would test not just our marriage but James's professional oath as a doctor. Her retaliation would come swiftly and without mercy, forcing James to make a choice that would echo through hospital corridors and the highest offices of government. As the sun set outside the paint-splattered window, we began the slow process of salvaging what we could. The damaged quilt, the broken mobile, the shattered picture frames containing ultrasound images of our daughter. Each item we rescued felt like a small victory, a statement that Eleanor hadn't destroyed everything. We should document this, Cassandra suggested quietly from the doorway where she'd been standing, giving us space while remaining a protective presence. Take photos of everything she damaged. You might need proof later. James nodded grimly, pulling out his phone. Good idea. I don't want to think my mother would take this further, but today has shown me I don't really know what she's capable of. As he methodically photographed the destruction, I sank onto the window seat, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. This wasn't just about a ruined nursery. It was about a woman who had decided our child was her possession, our home, her territory, our lives subject to her approval. James, I said softly, what if this is just the beginning? What if she tries to take control of how we raise our daughter? He stopped taking photos and knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. That will never happen, I promise you. From this moment on, my mother's influence over our family ends. I wanted to believe him. But as I looked around at the havoc Eleanor had wreaked in just 1 hour, I couldn't help but wonder what else she might be capable of destroying. That night, I couldn't sleep. The destruction of the nursery kept replaying in my mind, not just the physical damage, but the cold calculation behind it. Eleanor hadn't acted in a moment of passion. She'd planned this assault, bringing workers and supplies, choosing a time when James wouldn't be home. I lay awake beside my sleeping husband, my hand resting on my swollen belly, feeling our daughter kick as if she sensed my distress. The next morning, James called in to reschedule his surgeries, something he'd never done outside of true emergencies. Family comes first today, he said firmly when I protested that he shouldn't miss work. He made coffee while I picked at a slice of toast, neither of us quite ready to face the devastated nursery again. I've been thinking, James said, setting a mug of decaf in front of me. Maybe this is an opportunity to create something even better for our daughter. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Your mother destroyed everything we spent months building. I know, he acknowledged, his expression darkening momentarily. And I'm still furious about that. But what if we look at this as a chance to create something that truly represents our family? Just us, not my mother's influence, not what anyone else thinks a nursery should be. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. Check your email, now W. Eleanor sent something to the entire neighborhood association. My stomach dropped as I opened my inbox. There it was, an email from Eleanor Harrington to every member of our Georgetown neighborhood association, where she'd held the position of chairwoman before moving to her Hamptons estate. Dear friends, it began innocently enough. I write with grave concern about my daughter-in-law's mental stability during her pregnancy. Yesterday, I discovered Rebecca had destroyed the baby's nursery in what appears to be a hormone-induced episode. As you know, my son James holds a position of great responsibility as Surgeon General, and this instability in his home life is concerning. I ask for your discretion and support during this difficult time." "She's claiming I destroyed the nursery?" I gasped, showing James the screen. "She's telling everyone I'm mentally unstable?" James's face darkened as he read, his knuckles whitening around his coffee mug. "This ends now," he said, pulling out his phone and dialing his mother's number, putting it on speaker. Eleanor answered on the third ring, her voice honey-sweet. "James, darling, I was just thinking about you. Take down the email, Mother. Now." His voice was controlled but tight with anger. "What email, dear?" The false innocence in her tone made my blood boil. "The one where you lied to our entire neighborhood, claiming Rebecca destroyed the nursery when we have photographic evidence that you did it. The one where you question my wife's mental stability and suggest my home life is affecting my work." A pause then. "I'm only trying to protect you, James. Your position is too important to be compromised by domestic issues." "The only domestic issue I have is a mother who refuses to respect boundaries," James replied coldly. "Take down the email and send a retraction, or the next communication will be from our lawyer." Another pause, longer this time. "You would threaten legal action against your own mother, after everything I've sacrificed for you?" James didn't hesitate. "Yes, and I'll follow through if necessary." After he hung up, I stared at him, a mix of admiration and fear swirling in my chest. "Do you think she'll retract it?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly exhausted. "Honestly? No, but I needed her to know I'm serious." He squeezed my hand. "I've enabled her behavior for too long, Becca. That stops today." By noon, 3 neighbors had texted me expressing concern about my episode. By 2 o'clock, the hospital administrator had called James, delicately inquiring about, quote, stability in his personal life. Eleanor's poison was spreading exactly as she'd intended. "We need to show people the truth," I said, as James ended yet another awkward call. "Let's invite the neighbors to see what she really did." James hesitated. "Are you sure you want to put yourself through that? Having people traipse through our home, gawking at the damage?" I nodded firmly. "I'd rather be temporarily embarrassed than permanently labeled as unstable. Besides," I added, resting a hand on my belly, "I need to know our daughter won't be born into a community that thinks her mother is mentally unbalanced." That evening, we hosted an impromptu gathering. Cassandra helped me set out simple refreshments while James greeted neighbors at the door, thanking them for coming on such short notice. I could see the curiosity in their eyes, the sideways glances, everyone waiting to see if I would break down or confirm Eleanor's narrative. Instead, I stood beside my husband as he addressed our living room full of neighbors. "Thank you all for coming," James began, his voice steady. "We invited you here because a false narrative has been circulated about my wife and our home. Yesterday, while I was performing surgery, my mother entered our house without permission and destroyed the nursery we had created for our daughter. She then sent an email claiming Rebecca was responsible, questioning her mental stability." A murmur went through the crowd. James continued, his surgeon's composure never wavering. "Rather than tell you what happened, we'd like to show you. My mother claimed this was a hormone-induced episode on Rebecca's part. You all know Rebecca. You've served on committees with her, attended neighborhood functions together. We ask only that you see the evidence and judge for yourselves." We led the group upstairs to the nursery, where the destruction remained exactly as Eleanor had left it. Gasps filled the room as our neighbors took in the paint-splattered walls, the dismantled furniture, the ruined keepsakes. "Oh, Rebecca," whispered Margaret Wilton, the elderly woman who lived next door. "Your beautiful mural. You worked on it for weeks." Thomas Chen, whose wife was expecting their 3rd child, shook his head in disbelief. Who would do this to a pregnant woman's nursery? James stepped forward, showing them the photos he'd taken on his phone. The before images of the nursery we'd created together, followed by the damage his mother had inflicted. "My mother has always been controlling," James said quietly. "But this crossed a line I never imagined she would cross. We wanted you to know the truth. Not because we wish to air family grievances publicly, but because she's attempting to isolate Rebecca at a time when community support is most needed." By the time our neighbors left, the tide had turned. Messages of support flooded my phone. Offers to help rebuild the nursery, promises to correct anyone who repeated Eleanor's lies. It was a small victory, but an important one. Later that night, as James and I lay in bed, I finally allowed myself to cry, not just for the lost nursery, but for the years I'd spent trying to win over a woman who had decided from day one that I would never be good enough. "I keep wondering what I did wrong," I whispered into the darkness. 7 years of trying to please her, and she still hates me enough to do this. James pulled me closer, his hand resting protectively over our baby. "You did nothing wrong. My mother's issues have nothing to do with you, and everything to do with her own need for control. I see that clearly now." "What happens next?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me all day. "Tomorrow, we start rebuilding," he said simply. "And we set firm boundaries with my mother. She doesn't come to our home unless invited. She doesn't see the baby unless she acknowledges what she did and apologizes sincerely." I wanted to believe it would be that simple, but something in my gut told me Eleanor wasn't finished with us yet. I was right. 3 days later, James received a call from Dr. Montgomery, the chief of surgery at his hospital and a longtime family friend of the Harringtons. "Elias wants to see me in his office immediately," James said, hanging up, his brow furrowed. He wouldn't say why, but he sounded serious. A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Your mother knows everyone at that hospital. You don't think—" "Let's not jump to conclusions," James interrupted, though his expression betrayed his own concern. "I'll call you as soon as I know what's going on." After he left, I tried to distract myself by sorting through salvageable items from the nursery. Cassandra came over to help, bringing paint samples and new fabric swatches, determined to help us rebuild. "We'll make it even better," she insisted, spreading out catalogs on the kitchen table. "That woman won't win, Becca. Not this time." I wanted to share her optimism, but the knot in my stomach tightened with each hour that passed without word from James. When my phone finally rang around noon, I snatched it up, nearly dropping it in my haste. "James, what happened?" His voice was tight, controlled. "I need you to come to the hospital, now. Can Cassandra drive you?" "What's wrong? Is it your job?" The fear in my voice made Cassandra look up sharply. "I can't explain over the phone," he said. "Just come as soon as you can. Use the private entrance by the administrative offices. I'll meet you there." The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Cassandra tried to reassure me, but her own worry was evident in the way she gripped the steering wheel, in the nervous glances she kept throwing my way. "Whatever it is, you and James will face it together," she said as we pulled into the parking lot. "You're stronger than Eleanor. Remember that." James was waiting at the private entrance as promised, his face grim. He led us through a series of corridors to a small conference room where Dr. Montgomery sat with 2 other people. A woman in a crisp suit I didn't recognize, and a middle-aged man who introduced himself as the hospital's legal counsel. "Rebecca," Dr. Montgomery began once we were seated, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming in. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." The woman in the suit opened a folder. "Mrs. Harrington, I'm Sandra Liu from the Hospital Ethics Committee. We've received a formal complaint regarding your husband's medical practice." "A complaint?" I echoed, looking between her and James in confusion. "From whom?" "From Eleanor Harrington," James said flatly. "My mother is claiming I've been writing prescriptions for you without proper examination or documentation, specifically anti-anxiety medications that could harm the baby." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "That's absurd. I've never taken anxiety medication. My OB has records of every supplement and medication I've used during pregnancy." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Harrington Sr. has provided what appear to be prescription records with your husband's signature. If authentic, they represent a serious breach of medical ethics." "They're forgeries," James said firmly. "My mother has connections throughout this hospital. Someone gave her access to prescription pads or electronic records." Dr. Montgomery sighed heavily. "James, you know how serious these allegations are. Even if they're false, we're obligated to investigate. In the meantime, the board has decided to place you on administrative leave." "Administrative leave?" I gasped. But he's the Surgeon General. He has responsibilities, Patience. Which is precisely why we must handle this with absolute care, Sandra Leo interjected. His position makes these allegations even more damaging if they were to become public. The implication hung in the air. Eleanor hadn't just attacked James's hospital position, she was threatening his government appointment, his entire career. James reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it reassuringly. "What do you need from us to clear this up?" he asked, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Rebecca's complete medical records, for starters," the lawyer replied, "and your prescription records, both paper and electronic, for the past year." "I'll sign whatever releases you need," I said immediately. "My OB can confirm I've never been prescribed anxiety medication." Dr. Montgomery nodded. "That would be helpful. In the meantime, James, you're to have no contact with patients or hospital records. I'm sorry, but those are the board's instructions." As we left the meeting, James guided me to a quiet courtyard, away from curious eyes and potential eavesdroppers. Cassandra waited discreetly by a fountain, giving us privacy. "I can't believe she would go this far," I whispered, tears threatening to spill over. "Your career, James. Everything you've worked for." His jaw was set, a muscle twitching in his cheek, the only visible sign of his anger. "My career can be defended with facts. The truth will come out. But the damage to your reputation can be repaired," he finished firmly. "What can't be repaired is what this stress is doing to you and our baby. That's my primary concern right now." I placed my hands on my belly, feeling our daughter kick vigorously, as if in protest of the tension surrounding her. "What does your mother hope to gain from this? Even if she temporarily damages your career, how does that help her?" James's expression darkened. "Control. She's showing us what happens when I choose you over her. And she's creating a narrative that you're unstable, that I'm compromised because of you. If she can convince enough people, she thinks I'll eventually see things her way." "Which means what? Divorcing me? Giving her control over our child?" The very thought made me feel physically ill. "That will never happen," James said, his voice low and fierce. "Never. But we need to be strategic now. This isn't just about rebuilding a nursery anymore. We're fighting for our family's future." As we walked back to meet Cassandra, I felt a resolve hardening within me. Eleanor had underestimated me from the beginning, seen me as weak, malleable, easily intimidated. Perhaps it was time to show her exactly who she was dealing with. "We need to find out who helped her forge those prescriptions," I said as we reached the car. "Someone inside the hospital is working with her." James nodded grimly. "I already have suspicions. Dr. Winters in pharmacy has been friends with my mother for decades. And there's a records clerk who handled my father's medical information before he died. She's always been oddly deferential to my mother. Start there," I suggested. "Meanwhile, I'll gather every medical record I have. We'll build a timeline that proves I never received or filled those prescriptions." Cassandra, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. "You need more than defense. You need to go on the offensive." "What do you mean?" James asked. "Eleanor is counting on your professionalism, your discretion. She thinks you won't fight back publicly because it would be undignified for the Surgeon General." Cassandra's eyes gleamed with determination. "But what if you did exactly that? What if you brought everything into the light?" I considered this as we drove home, the idea taking shape in my mind. Eleanor's power had always thrived in shadows, in whispered insinuations, in private manipulations. Perhaps exposing her actions to public scrutiny was the one thing she truly feared. Back at home, I headed straight for my home office, where I kept meticulous records of everything, a habit from my days as a paralegal before I switched to nonprofit work. Every doctor's appointment, every prescription, every interaction with medical professionals during my pregnancy was documented, dated, and filed. James made calls to colleagues he trusted, people who might help identify who had assisted his mother. By evening, we had assembled a war room of sorts at our dining table. Medical records, hospital visit logs, prescription histories, all laid out chronologically. "Look at this," James said, pointing to a date on the forged prescription. "I was in Chicago that day, speaking at a medical conference. I couldn't possibly have written this." I nodded, making a note. And this one claims I filled it at Westside Pharmacy, but I was at a board meeting for the Children's Literacy Foundation. There are minutes proving I was there all afternoon. Piece by piece, we dismantled the false narrative Eleanor had constructed. But we both knew disproving her allegations was only the first step. We needed to understand the full scope of her plan and who else might be involved. "Do you think she's working alone?" I asked as we paused for a late dinner, picking at takeout neither of us had much appetite for. James considered this, his brow furrowed. "My mother rarely does her own dirty work. She influences, manipulates, finds people's weaknesses and exploits them. The question is, who else has she pulled into this? And why now, after all these years?" The answer came to me with sudden clarity. The baby. This isn't about me, or even about you. It's about her granddaughter. Your position as Surgeon General just gives her more leverage. Understanding dawned in James's eyes. You're right. She tolerated our marriage because she never saw you as a permanent threat. But a child changes everything, especially since my father's estate has that trust fund for his grandchildren. The trust fund that Eleanor controls until the child turns 21, I added, remembering the complex legal document James had explained to me years ago. If she can prove I'm unfit and you're compromised, she could petition for guardianship. James finished grimly. It's extreme, but not impossible given her connections and resources. The realization sent ice through my veins. This wasn't just about a ruined nursery or even James's career. Eleanor was playing a longer game, one that threatened my relationship with my own child. "We need to move quickly," I said, my protective instincts flaring. "Before she can escalate further." James nodded, his expression hardening with determination. "Tomorrow, we start fighting back. Not just defending ourselves, but taking the battle to her." As we cleared away the remains of our barely touched dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it, then nearly dropped the phone in shock. "James," I whispered, showing him the screen. "Look at this." The message was brief, but unmistakable. "I can prove Eleanor Harrington forged those prescriptions. Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m., coffee shop across from the hospital. Come alone. A friend in records." James stared at the text, his expression a mix of hope and suspicion. "It could be a trap, or it could be exactly what we need," I countered. "Someone inside the system who's willing to expose the truth." We debated late into the night, weighing risks against potential benefits, trying to determine if this mysterious ally was genuine or another of Eleanor's manipulations. In the end, we decided I would go, but not alone. Cassandra would accompany me, watching from a distance, ready to intervene if anything seemed amiss. As I finally drifted toward sleep that night, James's arm protectively around me, I found myself thinking about the nursery we would rebuild. Not just the physical space, but what it represented. A sanctuary for our daughter, free from Eleanor's toxic influence. A room filled with love instead of manipulation, with joy instead of fear. Whatever came next, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Eleanor Harrington had underestimated the lengths to which a mother would go to protect her child. She had mistaken my previous attempts at peacemaking for weakness, my diplomacy for docility. That had been her first mistake. It wouldn't be her last. The morning arrived with a heavy mist clinging to the streets of Georgetown, the kind of thick fog that seemed to muffle sounds and blur edges. It felt appropriate somehow, this physical manifestation of the uncertainty surrounding us. I dressed carefully, professional enough to be taken seriously, casual enough not to draw attention. At 8 months pregnant, my wardrobe options were limited, but I chose a navy dress that made me feel armored somehow. "Are you sure about this?" James asked as he handed me a travel mug of decaf tea, his concern evident in the tightness around his eyes. "We need allies," I replied, checking my phone one more time. "And if someone inside the hospital is willing to expose what your mother did, we can't ignore that." He nodded reluctantly. "Cassandra will be there. And I'll be 3 blocks away at the lawyer's office. Call me the second anything feels wrong." I kissed him goodbye, trying to project more confidence than I felt. 30 minutes later, I sat in the corner of a busy coffee shop across from the hospital, Cassandra positioned at a table near the door, pretending to be absorbed in her laptop but missing nothing. At precisely 9:01, a woman in hospital scrubs slid into the chair across from me. She was perhaps 50, with short, salt and pepper hair and alert eyes that scanned the room before settling on me. "Mrs. Harrington?" she asked quietly. I nodded, studying her face. "And you are?" "Melanie Doyle. I work in medical records." She placed a hospital ID card on the table, then quickly returned it to her pocket. "I don't have much time, so I'll be direct. Your mother-in-law altered prescription records in our system. I can prove it." My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. "Why would you help us?" "You don't know me." A bitter smile crossed her face. "I knew your father-in-law, Thomas Harrington. He was a good man, a good doctor. When he was dying, Eleanor tried to keep his nurses from giving him proper pain medication. Said it would cloud his judgment during his final days. I hadn't known this, and the revelation sent a chill through me. What kind of woman would deny her dying husband comfort? "What happened?" I asked. "I overrode her," Melanie said simply. "Got him the medication he needed. She never forgave me, tried to get me fired afterward, but Dr. Montgomery protected me." She leaned forward. "When I saw her in the records department last week with Dr. Winters, I knew something was wrong. Then I heard about your husband's suspension. What exactly did you see?" I pressed, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. Melanie glanced around once more, then pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "Everything's here. Time-stamped screenshots showing when the records were altered. The system logs IP addresses. These changes were made from Dr. Winters' computer, but after hours when he wasn't present. There's security footage of Eleanor entering his office during those times." My fingers closed around the flash drive, hope surging through me. This could save James's career. "It's more than that," Melanie said, her voice dropping even lower. "There's something else you should know. Eleanor has been accessing your prenatal records, your genetic testing, everything. She has no medical reason or authorization to view those files. The implication hit me like a physical blow. She's building a case against me, trying to find something she can use to question my fitness as a mother." Melanie nodded grimly. "I've included those access logs as well. Mrs. Harrington, be careful. I've worked at this hospital for 23 years, and I've never seen someone as calculating as your mother-in-law. Why risk your job to help us?" I asked, genuinely curious. She stood, adjusting her scrubs. "Because Thomas Harrington once saved my daughter's life when everyone else had given up. And because some things matter more than keeping your head down." She hesitated. "There's one more thing. Check the prenatal records carefully. I think she may have altered some test results." Before I could ask what she meant, Melanie slipped away, disappearing into the morning crowd heading into the hospital. Cassandra was at my side instantly. "Did you get it?" she asked, eyeing the flash drive in my hand. I nodded, my mind racing with implications. "And something more. We need to get to James immediately." At the lawyer's office, we gathered around a computer, watching in silence as file after file confirmed Melanie's claims. There it was in undeniable detail, the digital trail of Eleanor's sabotage, the altered prescription records, the unauthorized access to my medical files, and most disturbingly, changes to my genetic screening results, subtly modified to suggest chromosomal abnormalities that didn't exist. "She was going to use this to question my judgment," James said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Suggest that I was hiding concerning test results from you, or that we were both in denial about potential health issues with the baby." Our lawyer, Michael Chen, looked grim as he reviewed the evidence. "This goes beyond hospital ethics violations. This is criminal, medical fraud, forgery, privacy violations. We can file charges. Will it be enough?" I asked, one hand protectively over my belly. "To stop her completely?" Michael considered this. "It gives us significant leverage, but someone with Eleanor's resources and connections, she might find ways to mitigate the damage." "Then we need more," James said firmly. We need to understand the full scope of what she's doing, not just react to each attack. I thought about Melanie's parting words, about Thomas Harrington and the pain medication. What if your mother has a pattern of this behavior? What if there are others who've experienced similar manipulation? James's eyes widened slightly. My father's hospice nurse. She left abruptly after he died. Mother said she'd been stealing medications, but maybe that was a lie. I finished. Do you know how to reach her? He nodded slowly. Her name was Diane Ramirez. I sent her a thank you card after the funeral. I might still have her address somewhere. While James searched for Diane's contact information, I revisited the altered medical records, trying to understand the full scope of Eleanor's plan. She hadn't just created false prescriptions, she'd woven an intricate narrative designed to isolate us, discredit us, and ultimately gain control of our child. Found her, James announced, holding up his phone. Diane's working at a palliative care center in Baltimore. I've sent her an email explaining the situation. By evening, Diane had not only responded but agreed to meet us the following day. I've waited years for someone to ask about what really happened, she wrote. It's time the truth came out. That night, as James and I tried to process everything we'd learned, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I answered cautiously. Rebecca, this is Richard Winters. The voice of the doctor allegedly involved in Eleanor's scheme sent adrenaline coursing through me. I need to speak with you and James. Not at the hospital, not on the phone. It's about Eleanor. James took the phone, his voice guarded. Dr. Winters, what's this about? I could only hear one side of the conversation, but James's expression shifted from suspicion to surprise. When he hung up, he looked troubled. He claims Eleanor coerced him, James explained. Says she has something on him that could destroy his career, and that's why he gave her access to his computer. He wants to meet tomorrow morning. Do you believe him? I asked. James shrugged. I don't know. Winters has always been ambitious, ethically flexible. But he's also a father of 3, with a wife fighting cancer. He might have vulnerabilities Eleanor could exploit. We decided to meet Dr. Winters after our appointment with Diane, approaching both conversations with caution. Eleanor had proven herself capable of elaborate deceptions. We couldn't rule out the possibility that either meeting could be a trap. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the previous day's fog burned away by bright winter sunshine. It felt like an omen somehow, this sudden clarity after days of murky uncertainty. Diane Ramirez met us at a quiet cafe in Baltimore, her nurse's scrubs exchanged for casual clothes that couldn't hide her professional posture. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with kind eyes that hardened when James mentioned his mother. I wondered if you'd ever question the narrative, she said after we'd exchanged introductions. Eleanor Harrington is very good at controlling the story. What really happened during my father's final days? James asked quietly. Diane took a deep breath. Your father was in tremendous pain, but fully lucid. He wanted to make changes to his will, specifically to the trust fund for his future grandchildren. He asked me to contact his lawyer. James leaned forward. What kind of changes? He wanted to remove Eleanor as trustee. Said he'd seen how she used money to control you and feared she'd do the same with your children. Diane's eyes were steady, unflinching. When Eleanor found out, she banned me from his room, claimed I was giving him too much medication, affecting his judgment. She had me removed from the case entirely. Did my father ever make those changes? James asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Diane shook her head sadly. Eleanor made sure he couldn't. Restricted visitor access, monitored his phone calls. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. He died 3 days later. The implications hung heavy in the air between us. Eleanor hadn't just manipulated medical records in the present. She'd potentially prevented Thomas Harrington from protecting his grandchildren from her control years ago. Would you be willing to make a formal statement about this? I asked Diane. She nodded without hesitation. I've carried this guilt for years. I should have fought harder for your father's wishes. James reached across the table, briefly touching her hand. "You did what you could against a formidable opponent. Thank you for telling us the truth now." Armed with this new information, we drove to our meeting with Dr. Winters, both of us quiet, processing the layers of Eleanor's deception that were being revealed. Dr. Winters had chosen a park for our meeting, perhaps hoping the open space would reassure us he wasn't planning anything underhanded. He looked haggard, the confident surgeon replaced by a man clearly under tremendous stress. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said without preamble as we sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. "She said she just wanted to check some records, make sure everything was being done properly for her grandchild." "And you believed that?" James asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Winters ran a hand over his face. "No, but she had leverage." He lowered his voice. "Years ago, I made a medical error that should have been reported. Eleanor's husband, your father, helped cover it up to protect the hospital's reputation. Eleanor has kept that documentation all these years. She threatened to release it if I didn't help her. So you gave her access to confidential medical records," I said, unable to keep the judgment from my voice. "You helped her forge prescriptions in my husband's name." "I gave her my login credentials," he clarified, as if that distinction mattered. "I didn't know exactly what she planned to do with them. When I found out, it was too late. She already had what she needed." James's expression was a mixture of disgust and pity. "You need to make a formal statement. Come clean about everything." Winters paled. "I could lose my license. My wife needs my insurance for her treatments." "You should have thought of that before giving my mother access to private medical records," James replied coldly. Then, relenting slightly, "But if you cooperate fully, I'll do what I can to ensure the consequences focus on Eleanor's actions rather than yours." As we left Dr. Winters to consider his options, I felt the baby shift and kick vigorously. Placing a hand on my belly, I was struck by the fierce protectiveness that washed over me. This child, not yet born, was already at the center of a battle for control, one I was determined to win. "We need to move fast," I told James as we drove home. "Eleanor doesn't know what evidence we've gathered. The longer we wait, the more chances she has to cover her tracks or launch another attack." James nodded grimly. "I'll call Michael. We'll file formal complaints with the hospital board, the medical ethics committee, and, if necessary, law enforcement. And the trust fund," I added. "If what Diane said is true, Eleanor prevented your father from changing the trustee arrangement. There must be legal recourse." That evening, as we finalized our strategy with Michael, my phone lit up with a text from Cassandra. "Eleanor just pulled up outside your house. She's alone." James and I exchanged looks of surprise. After everything she'd done, Eleanor had the audacity to show up at our doorstep? "Let me handle this," I said, rising from the table despite James's protest. "She thinks I'm the weak link. Let's use that to our advantage." I opened the front door before Eleanor could ring the bell, catching her with her hand raised. She looked immaculate as always. Tailored coat, perfect hair, not a hint of the chaos she'd created visible in her composed exterior. "Rebecca," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "You look tired. May I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, leading her to the living room where James stood waiting, his expression carefully neutral. "Mother," he acknowledged coolly, "this is unexpected." Eleanor removed her gloves slowly, a practiced gesture meant to convey control of the situation. "I thought it was time we had a family discussion. Recent events have spiraled in an unfortunate direction." The understatement was so absurd I almost laughed. "Unfortunate direction? You destroyed our nursery. You tried to destroy James's career. You falsified medical records. Which part exactly are you referring to?" If my directness surprised her, Eleanor hit it well. "I understand you're upset. Pregnancy hormones can make everything seem more dramatic than it is." "Stop," James cut in sharply. "We know everything, Mother." Dr. Winters confessed. "Melanie Doyle provided evidence of your unauthorized access to Rebecca's medical records. Diane Ramirez told us about Dad's final days. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross Eleanor's perfect composure. It vanished quickly, replaced by a calculated smile. "James, darling, you can't possibly believe these disgruntled employees over your own mother. I've only ever wanted what's best for you, for our family." "Our family?" I repeated, one hand resting on my belly. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not the nursery, not James's career. This is about control of your grandchild." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "I simply want to ensure my grandchild has every advantage, every opportunity. The Harrington name carries certain expectations." "And you don't believe I'm capable of raising a Harrington," I stated flatly. "You have many lovely qualities, Rebecca," Eleanor replied with the condescension that had characterized our entire relationship. "But you don't understand our world, our responsibilities. James has a position of national importance. His child will be born into privilege and scrutiny. It requires careful management." "Management by you," James said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Like you managed Dad's final days, preventing him from changing his will when he saw exactly who you really are." Quote, a flash of genuine alarm crossed Eleanor's face before she regained control. "Your father was heavily medicated." He wasn't thinking clearly. "We have written statements saying otherwise," I countered. "Just like we have evidence of every line you've crossed these past weeks." Eleanor stood abruptly, the pretense of a friendly family visit abandoned. "Be very careful about the accusations you make. I have resources you can't imagine." "So do we," James replied evenly, the truth being chief among them. "It's over, Mother. The manipulation, the control, all of it ends now." Eleanor turned to me, her eyes cold as winter. "You've turned my son against me. You won't get away with this." I met her gaze without flinching. "You turned James against you all by yourself. I just helped him see it." After she left, the house felt lighter somehow, as if a shadow had been lifted. James pulled me into his arms, his hand resting protectively over our baby. "Are you okay?" he murmured against my hair. "I'm better than okay," I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. "For the first time since this all began, I believe we're going to win." "She won't give up easily," James warned. "That wasn't surrender, it was reconnaissance. She's assessing what we know, planning her next move." "Let her plan," I said with newfound confidence. "We have something she doesn't." "What's that?" I smiled, feeling our daughter kick against my palm. "We're fighting for love, not control, and that makes us stronger than she can possibly imagine." As if in agreement, the baby delivered a particularly vigorous kick that made us both laugh. In that moment of shared joy, I felt something shift within me. Fear giving way to determination, uncertainty to resolve. Eleanor had spent years making me feel small, inadequate, unworthy of the Harrington name. But standing in my home with my husband and unborn child, I realized a fundamental truth. I wasn't fighting to prove myself worthy of Eleanor's acceptance. I was fighting to free our family from her toxic influence forever. And that was a battle I was prepared to win, no matter what came next. The next week unfolded with breathtaking speed. With evidence from Melanie, Diane, and Dr. Winters in hand, James's lawyer filed formal complaints with the Hospital Ethics Committee, the Medical Licensing Board, and the family court overseeing the trust fund. Each morning brought new developments, new battles, new moments of uncertainty and resolve. "The hospital board wants to meet with both of us tomorrow," James announced, hanging up the phone after a lengthy call with Dr. Montgomery. "They've reviewed the evidence. Winters gave a full statement confirming your mother's actions." I nodded, sorting through paint samples for the nursery rebuild that had become a symbol of our resistance. "And the trust fund investigation? Moving forward. The judge has frozen all assets pending review." James sat beside me, gently taking the paint chips from my trembling hands. "Hey, we're making progress, real progress." I leaned into his shoulder, suddenly exhausted. At 8.5 months pregnant, the constant stress was taking its toll. "I know. I just keep waiting for her next move. She's been too quiet this week." James kissed the top of my head. Maybe she realizes she's beaten. I laughed at that, a genuine sound of amusement. Your mother? Never. She's regrouping, planning something we haven't anticipated. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from a hospital number I didn't recognize. Eleanor Harrington has been accessing your OB's scheduling system. She knows your next appointment is Thursday at 3. Be careful. Melanie's still watching out for us, I murmured, showing James the message. His jaw tightened. What could she possibly want with your OB appointment? The answer hit me with sudden clarity. The nursery, your career, now my prenatal care. She's targeting everything connected to the baby, piece by piece. I'll call Dr. Chen, have her change your appointment, and flag your records for additional security, James said, already reaching for his phone. I placed my hand over his, stopping him. No, let's let her think she's one step ahead, but we'll be prepared this time. The following morning, we met with the hospital board, 5 stern-faced administrators, seated behind a long table, reviewing the evidence we'd gathered. James sat beside me, his posture straight, his voice steady as he detailed his mother's manipulation of medical records. Dr. Harrington, the chief administrator said after we'd presented our case, the evidence you've provided is concerning, to say the least. We've already suspended Dr. Winters pending a full investigation. As for your mother's access to confidential records, our IT department confirms unauthorized logins from her devices. What about James's suspension? I asked, unwilling to let protocol and politeness delay justice. The woman's expression softened slightly. The board has voted unanimously to reinstate Dr. Harrington immediately, with a formal apology for the distress caused. Furthermore, Mrs. Harrington Sr.'s hospital privileges as a benefactor have been revoked. She will no longer have access to any part of this facility without express permission and escort. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by caution. Eleanor's influence extended far beyond hospital walls. One battle won didn't mean the war was over. As we left the meeting, Dr. Montgomery pulled James aside for a private word. I waited nearby, watching their intense conversation, noting the grave expression on both men's faces. When James returned, his complexion was ashen. What is it? I asked, instantly alarmed. Not here, he murmured, guiding me toward an exit. I'll explain in the car. Once safely enclosed in our vehicle, James gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. Montgomery just informed me that my mother has reached out to the Surgeon General Selection Committee, raising concerns about my judgment and stability. The implications hit me like a physical blow. She's trying to get your appointment revoked. He nodded grimly. Apparently, she's claiming my family situation is affecting my ability to perform my duties. She's painted you as unstable and me as compromised by misplaced loyalty. Can she actually succeed? I asked, my hand instinctively covering my belly, as if to shield our daughter from this new threat. It's unlikely. The committee knows my work, my reputation, but she's creating doubt, forcing me to defend myself instead of focusing on my responsibilities. He sighed heavily. Classic Eleanor tactic. Even if she doesn't win, she makes sure everyone pays a price for defying her. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. Then we don't just defend. We end this once and for all. That night, we gathered our allies around our dining room table. Cassandra, Michael our lawyer, Melanie from hospital records, and Diane, the former hospice nurse. Each brought pieces of the puzzle, evidence of Eleanor's pattern of manipulation and control stretching back years. The trust fund is key, Michael emphasized, spreading documents across the table. Thomas Harrington clearly intended to change the trustee arrangements before he died. If we can prove Eleanor deliberately prevented that, we have grounds to petition the court for a complete review. What about the falsified medical records? Cassandra asked. Isn't that criminal? Michael nodded. Multiple felonies, actually, but prosecuting would be complicated and public, something to consider given James's position. And the potential impact on your child? Diane added gently. Court battles can drag on for years. I exchanged a look with James, a silent communication born of the crucible we'd been through together. What if we offered her a deal? I suggested. All eyes turned to me in surprise. Eleanor cares about 3 things, I continued. Money, social standing, and control. We can leverage all 3. What kind of deal did you have in mind? Michael asked, intrigued. I outlined my proposal. A carefully constructed arrangement that would protect our family while giving Eleanor a face-saving exit from the conflict she'd created. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was practical, enforceable, and immediate. When I finished, James squeezed my hand, pride evident in his eyes. It might actually work. She'll counteroffer, Michael warned. Try to modify terms in her favor. Let her, I said with newfound confidence. We're negotiating from strength now, not fear. Thursday arrived, the day of my scheduled OB appointment that Eleanor had discovered. As planned, I arrived at the medical building, but instead of heading to Dr. Chen's office, I went to a private conference room we'd arranged. James was already there, along with Michael and a court reporter. At precisely 3:15, Eleanor swept into the building, her timing calculated to intercept me leaving the appointment that wasn't actually happening. Cassandra, positioned in the lobby, texted me. She's here. Security is directing her to you as planned. Minutes later, Eleanor entered the conference room, momentary confusion crossing her perfect features before she regained composure. What is this? She demanded, eyes narrowing at the assembled group. Please sit down, Mother, James said, his voice professionally neutral. We have a proposal for you. Eleanor remained standing, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. I don't have time for games. I came to speak with Rebecca about the baby's health. Privately. No, you came to interfere with my medical care, I corrected calmly. Just as you interfered with the nursery, James's career, and apparently your late husband's wishes for his grandchildren. A flash of something. Alarm? Respect? Crossed Eleanor's face before she masked it. I don't know what you're talking about. Michael slid a document across the table. This is our proposed agreement. I suggest you review it carefully. Eleanor didn't touch the paper. I don't need an agreement with my own family. You do if you want to avoid criminal charges for medical fraud, forgery, and privacy violations, James replied evenly. Not to mention a very public lawsuit regarding the trust fund. That got her attention. Eleanor's perfectly manicured hand reached for the document, her expression betraying nothing as she scanned the contents. This is absurd, she finally said, though with less conviction than before. You're asking me to relinquish trusteeship of Thomas's fund, to submit to supervised visitation with my own grandchild, to make a public apology. We're offering you a path forward that preserves your dignity and freedom, I countered. The alternative is prosecution and public exposure of everything you've done, not just recently, but throughout your management of the trust. Eleanor's gaze shifted between us, calculating. And if I refuse? James leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Then by this time tomorrow, the hospital board will have filed criminal charges. I will have petitioned for emergency removal of your trusteeship, and every society board you sit on will receive documentation of your actions. Your choice, Mother. The silence that followed was electric with tension. Eleanor placed the document down carefully, her movements deliberate and controlled. I need time to consider this. And to consult my own attorney. You have 24 hours, Michael replied. The offer expires tomorrow at 4 p.m. As Eleanor gathered her things to leave, I felt compelled to ask the question that had haunted me for weeks. Why, Eleanor? Why go to such lengths to destroy what we built for our daughter? She paused, regarding me with those cold blue eyes that had intimidated me for so long. Because you were never going to raise her correctly. You don't understand our world, our responsibilities. James needs a partner who enhances his position, not someone who pulls him down to mediocrity. The words should have stung, but instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity. You still don't see it, do you? Your vision of correct parenting created a son who had to learn what love actually means. James doesn't want our daughter raised as you raised him, as a status symbol, an extension of your ambition. You know nothing about how I raised my son, Eleanor snapped, the first genuine emotion she'd shown. I know everything about it, I replied softly. I've spent 7 years helping him unlearn the conditional love you taught him. Our daughter will know she's cherished for who she is, not what she achieves or who she impresses. Eleanor's perfect composure cracked, just for a moment. You think it's so simple. You have no idea what it takes to build and maintain a legacy, to prepare a child for real power and influence. Maybe not, I conceded, but I know what it takes to build a family based on love instead of control. And that's the legacy James and I choose for our daughter. After Eleanor left, James embraced me tightly. That was incredible, he murmured against my hair. You were incredible. The next 24 hours passed in a strange limbo of anticipation and preparation. We proceeded with rebuilding the nursery, friends and neighbors pitching in to create something even more beautiful than before. The woodland mural reappeared on the walls, painted by a local artist who'd heard our story. The broken crib was replaced with one handcrafted by a neighbor who worked as a carpenter. At 3:57 p.m. the following day, Michael called. Eleanor's attorney just delivered her response. She's counter-offering. My heart sank. What does she want? Surprisingly little, Michael replied, sounding almost confused. She accepts relinquishing the trusteeship, but requests quarterly financial statements. She agrees to supervised visitation for the first year, with a review after that. And instead of a public apology, she proposes a joint statement about family reconciliation and her stepping down from the trust due to health concerns. James and I exchanged surprised looks. That's reasonable, he said cautiously, almost too reasonable. What's the catch? I asked Michael. One additional clause. She wants naming rights for the baby. Specifically, she wants the middle name to be Thomas, after your father-in-law. I felt tears spring unexpectedly to my eyes. Not for Eleanor's manipulation, but for the glimpse of genuine feeling behind it. Despite everything, she had loved her husband. This wasn't just about control, it was about legacy, about keeping Thomas Harrington's memory alive in his granddaughter. We can agree to that, I said softly, meeting James's questioning gaze. We'd already discussed honoring your father somehow. The agreement was signed by day's end, notarized and filed with the family court. Eleanor would step down as trustee, replaced by a professional fiduciary. She would have limited, supervised contact with our daughter for the first year, with future arrangements dependent on her behavior. And our daughter would carry Thomas as her middle name, not because Eleanor demanded it, but because we chose to honor the grandfather she would never meet. 3 weeks later, as spring sunlight streamed through the newly rebuilt nursery windows, I went into labor. 16 hours of intensity, pain, and ultimate triumph later, Charlotte Thomas Harrington entered the world, her lusty cries filling the delivery room. She's perfect, James whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held our daughter for the first time. Absolutely perfect. In those first precious days cocooned in the hospital room with our new family, Eleanor's shadow seemed distant, inconsequential. The trust fund conflict, the falsified records, the destroyed nursery, all faded against the reality of Charlotte's tiny fingers and determined gaze. On our third day, as we prepared to take Charlotte home, a nurse entered with a large bouquet of white roses. "These just arrived for you," she said, handing me the card. I opened it with trepidation, recognizing Eleanor's elegant stationery immediately. Inside, just a few handwritten lines. To Charlotte Thomas. May you inherit your father's compassion and your mother's courage. I look forward to meeting you properly when you're both ready. Grandmother Eleanor. James read the card over my shoulder, his expression a complex mixture of surprise and cautious hope. Do you think she means it? I gazed down at our sleeping daughter, so new to the world, untouched by the conflicts that had preceded her arrival. I don't know, but she's offering a beginning, not an ending. That's something. 1 month later, we welcomed Eleanor for her first supervised visit. She arrived precisely on time, impeccably dressed as always, but with an uncharacteristic hesitation in her step. She brought no lavish gifts, no grand gestures, just a small, elegantly wrapped package that turned out to contain a simple silver bracelet. It was mine as a child, she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. Then Thomas gave it to me again on our wedding day. Something old, something new. I thought perhaps someday. I nodded, accepting both the bracelet and the olive branch it represented. Thank you. We'll keep it for her. Eleanor's time with Charlotte was brief, formal, but without the cold calculation I'd feared. She held her granddaughter carefully, spoke to her softly, and when it was time to leave, relinquished her without protest. At the door, she paused, turning to face both James and me. I won't pretend to approve of all your choices, she said with typical Eleanor directness. But I am, learning to respect them. Thomas would have adored her, you know. He always wanted a granddaughter. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't a surrender, but it was a beginning. A small crack in the fortress Eleanor had built around herself, a glimpse of the woman who might, someday, be capable of loving without controlling. That evening, as I rocked Charlotte in the nursery, we'd rebuilt together, stronger, more beautiful than before. I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The destroyed room that had become a symbol of resistance. The career attack that had revealed allies we never knew we had. The trust fund battle that had ultimately protected our daughter's future. Eleanor had tried to tear apart everything we built, but in doing so she had forced us to build something stronger. Our marriage. Our home. Our community of friends and supporters. Even our understanding of ourselves, and what we were capable of defending. I gazed down at Charlotte, her tiny hand wrapped trustingly around my finger. Your grandmother is a complicated woman, I whispered, and someday you'll form your own relationship with her. But know this, your father and I fought for you before you were even born. We will always fight for your right to be exactly who you are, not who anyone else thinks you should be. James appeared in the doorway, watching us with love shining in his eyes. The ultimate act of rebellion against my mother's worldview, he said softly, coming to kneel beside the rocking chair. Unconditional love. As Charlotte drifted to sleep in my arms, secure in the knowledge that she was cherished exactly as she was, I realized that the nursery destruction had given us an unexpected gift. It had forced us to define our family on our own terms, to draw boundaries that should have been drawn years ago, to stand firmly together against forces that would have divided us. Eleanor had meant to break us. Instead, she had made us unbreakable. In the soft glow of the nursery lamp, surrounded by walls we had rebuilt and dreams we had reclaimed, I made a silent promise to our daughter. She would grow up knowing her worth wasn't measured by achievements or appearances. She would understand that true strength comes not from controlling others, but from standing firmly in your own truth. And she would learn, through our example, that love is not a weapon or a bargaining chip, but the foundation upon which everything of value is built. The next morning, I opened our front door to find a team of landscape architects on our doorstep. Mrs. Harrington? The lead designer asked. We're here about the garden installation. Your mother-in-law commissioned it as a welcome home gift for the baby. James appeared behind me, Charlotte cradled against his chest. Did she now? He asked, one eyebrow raised in amused skepticism. The designer offered a clipboard with detailed plans. A children's garden, very natural, designed to grow with the child. Butterfly bushes, sensory plants, a small pond with safety features. Mrs. Harrington Sr. was quite specific that it should be imaginative, not formal, not our usual style for Georgetown, but quite lovely. James and I exchanged meaningful looks over Charlotte's sleeping head. Eleanor Harrington, advocating for imagination over formality? Perhaps people really could change, even if only in small incremental ways. We'd like to see the plans, I said, opening the door wider to invite them in. But the final decisions will be ours. As the designers spread their drawings across our dining table, I realized that this was our new reality, accepting what was offered with gratitude, but maintaining clear boundaries. Eleanor might never fully transform, but perhaps she could learn to express love without demanding control in return. And if not, we were prepared for that too. Our family, James, Charlotte, and I, had been forged in conflict but strengthened by love. Whatever came next, we would face it together, unbroken and unbreakable. 6 months later, as summer sunshine warmed the garden Eleanor had indeed created for Charlotte, I watched my daughter reach curiously for a butterfly that had landed on a nearby flower, her eyes wide with wonder, her tiny hands grasping at sunlight and shadow. James sat beside me on the garden bench, his arm around my shoulders, his expression peaceful in a way it had never been when Eleanor dominated our lives. She sent another invitation, he mentioned casually, for Charlotte's christening. Wants to host at her house. I smiled, watching our daughter's delighted face as the butterfly fluttered just beyond her reach. Tell her we appreciate the offer, but we've already arranged it at our church. She's welcome to attend as a guest. James nodded, dropping a kiss on my temple. Boundaries maintained. Always, I agreed. For Charlotte's sake, and ours. In the nursery we had rebuilt. In the garden unexpected kindness had created. In the family we protected fiercely, we had found our strength, not in winning every battle, but in knowing which ones truly mattered. Not in defeating Eleanor completely, but in refusing to become like her in the process. Our daughter would grow up knowing the story, how her room was destroyed and rebuilt, how her father stood firm against manipulation, how her mother found a voice that could not be silenced. Not as a tale of family division, but as a testament to what love can withstand and overcome. And perhaps someday Eleanor too would understand the lesson hidden within her defeat. That true family isn't built on control, appearance, or achievement, but on acceptance, respect, and unconditional love. Until then, we would continue setting boundaries with one hand while leaving the door slightly open with the other, for Charlotte's sake, and for the possibility that even the most controlling heart might someday learn to simply love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.